Hey guys, welcome to my first YouTube post. My name is Michelle. I am a watercolorist, recently a watercolorist playing with just a lot of mixed media, anything I can get my hands on. And I've officially been painting for 1 year. And I figured that was a very good occasion to finally start up a YouTube channel and dedicate today's video to going through, maybe not all, but the majority of my paintings and sketchbooks that I have made in this first year of painting. I figured it would be really helpful to put that out there, especially to fellow beginner artists, especially adult beginner artists who might feel like, you know, progress is such a ways away. But I am very taken aback and proud of how much progress I've seen just in the last year. And mind you, I don't think I've picked up a paintbrush or drawn or created anything since I was like in middle school. So I'm really excited to show you guys where my artist journey began, how my paintings have evolved in just a year, and maybe by the end of it, if that doesn't take too much time, I can share with you what my current sketchbooks, what my current art is looking like. Okay guys, so we're gonna get started from the very beginning of me watching my first YouTube videos on how to watercolor back in December of 2022, or maybe January of 2023. I can't quite remember anymore. But I found Jenna Rainey online. You know, I was bored, I picked up some watercolor, and that's that. And here we are now. So here, you know, I have a whole stack of papers here before I got any sketchbooks here. We'll try and get through them pretty quickly. I haven't looked through them all, so they'll be kind of, you know, we'll be looking through them together. Here's one of the first color charts I ever made. You can see, you know, we didn't really have too good a watercolor paint just then. I hadn't gotten any professional styled paints just yet, so we could see a little mudding there. More color wheels, Monstera. So pretty early on, I started playing around a lot with watercolor and micron pens. I don't quite remember how I got into that. Here, I remember being really proud of this painting here because I thought everything looked really good, but this lavender weirdly ended up being upside down, and that was that. I don't really know what happened there. A lot of my paintings in the very beginning, honestly, most of the paper that I bought went to kind of just not full cohesive pieces, but just random practices. This is from one of the first tutorials I took with Jenna Rainey, where we finished with making this wreath to practice making leaves, branches, different kinds of flowers. I'll probably put this to the side because I ended up remaking this wreath like 9 months later, and I was pretty proud of it. Here we've got a lot just playing around with how watercolor works. Excuse me. Actually, this might be, these papers here are actually the very first paintings I made from starting to learn watercolor. This is a very low quality paper here that couldn't hold a lot of water. It was okay because my paint and my brushes couldn't hold a lot of water either. These are probably my very first paintings, and it was just practicing a lot of leaves and a lot of petals, trying to get the colors to blend, and I remember it wasn't working at all. Yeah, here I was trying to mix red and blue, and yeah, these paints just wouldn't. Oh, I remember this Jenna Rainey exercise, trying to mix those circles up together, and it never ever working out for me. Here we have some more, practicing leaves and branches. That lemon there is actually not too bad. Here, I remember this day, I was trying to play with color mixing and just figuring out all the colors I could make with different values, different reds and yellows. I remember this might have been in my very first month of painting. This one as well. I can tell these are some very, very early paintings just by the feel of this paper. Oh yeah, still some of my first works from that first month, practicing those petals, practicing a little tulip. I think I was finally getting the color bleeds there. Oh, and then somehow along the way I picked up a calligraphy pen, and this is when I started trying to play with that. Did a little bit more here. I can tell by this feeling here. This is the Fabriano 25% cotton paper. So now we've got a little bit more. Here's a little illustration that I made pretty early on, and I was pretty happy with. I still think I am kind of happy with. More circles. Still not really working out for me. This is one of my first bouquets that I tried to paint. I remember getting a filbert brush for the first time and trying to figure it out here. I was quite proud of this when I first made it, and I'm pretty happy seeing it now, you know, and just seeing the progress that has happened along the way. Got some more flowers, tulips. I know I worked really, really hard to try and make peonies for a little while. Here, I can see that I was playing with some wet on wet technique. These here are actually dated. This is February 13th, February 14th of 2023. That was about 11 months ago now. So Jenna Rainey tutorial. I'm just gonna speed through these a little bit because it's kind of a lot of the same. I'm practicing leaves and flowers over and over and over again. Here I use a little bit of ink for a little illustration, but it's mostly a little bit of the same all throughout. You can see here I'm playing a little bit more with the fine liners and starting to get a lot more into it. Still trying to get into roses. I can see here that I was starting to learn to let things dry, the benefits of adding in a second layer to things. So my roses here are starting to get a little bit more dimension. Just practice sheet. This looks like a piece of scrap paper. This might have been a little later on, but it is another piece of scrap paper. These here weren't quite as early on, but this is when I was still using a lot of loose leaf. By this point in time, I'm not quite sure when this was. It wasn't as early as February 23, but maybe around July or August. Here I finally am getting a lot more dimension, a lot more layers. Okay, here we have my very first sketchbook that I bought. Some leaves, playing around with wet on wet, and not really working out. Same thing here. Trying to play with that filbert brush I see. Still figuring out how to get these color mixes. Again, most of this is really not working out that well for me, just because of the paper I'm using early on, the paint, the brushes, everything was a kind of lower quality material back here. So you'll see a lot of difficulty getting colors to blend the way that I would really like them to. I'm starting to add second layers here, which is nice. Again here, starting to add some second layers after it dries. Because in the beginning you could see a lot of it's very one-dimensional. But now we're starting to get somewhere here. Still trying to get these circles to blend, which is not working. Watermelon, I'm not great. Playing around with some color mixing, which I could honestly still use more practice with. Oh, I remember being quite proud of this. I remember kind of being in this phase where I was discovering that when I didn't really like how my watercolor paintings were coming out, I could always add some details with a micron pen, and suddenly it just was exponentially better. And I'm still doing that quite often. I remember being very happy with how this tulip came out here. I guess me using this micron pen very early on was the beginning of me getting into mixed media. Just some more color blending here with reds. First time making daffodils, I remember that. And swatching my first Daniel Smith paintings over here, or paints, sorry. My first time trying to practice making white flowers. So after that, I started getting a few more sketchbooks because I was getting really tired of just having a million papers everywhere all of the time. And this is when I started getting more into sketchbooks. I probably started this, all right, one of my first bigger sketchbooks here was May 7th. So this here is about, after 4 full months of painting, here we started this sketchbook. I'm starting to repaint like references of flowers that I see. Starting to add in more details, wet on dry. And in the beginning, my sketchbook still looks a lot like some full pieces are coming together, but it's still a lot of just kind of chaos and just practicing and practicing and practicing the same strokes, the same flowers over and over again. I very specifically remember making this peony and just trying to learn a little bit more about shading with wet on dry. And we're starting to add in different layers here. This was in a tutorial by Andrew Gleason, I believe his name is. Practicing peonies over and over again. Starting to practice bouquets that I've created on my own aside from a tutorial. Here's some more flowers I've tried to create. I remember being really happy with this one, adding in those little shadows. This is June 15th. So I've been painting at this point about 5.5, almost 6 months. Little avocado here, playing around with wet on wet. At this point, I think I've still only been painting flowers and leaves. That's what my whole sketchbook is. Yeah, no real cohesive pieces here, just practicing and practicing and practicing. I think this was an attempt at a bouquet. It doesn't really come together. My husband made this. I made him sit down and watercolor with me, and he's done it once in the last year, and this was created, and it's pretty good. All right, I can see I've got my Princeton Blooms brush by now. So I'm playing with it here and trying to figure out how to use it. Okay, here we got another Arteza. We got a lot of practices here. I think this sketchbook I had set aside not do so much of this practice, but to have more full pieces. So this is from May 11th, starting to try and get actual bouquets, full pieces. Still got a lot of pages like this that are just practicing and practicing and practicing. Playing with some wet on wet. It's coming out a little bit more successful this time around. I think by the time I got this sketchbook, I have transitioned over to Winsor & Newton paints and Princeton brushes. So you can see that my color blending is becoming a little bit more successful by now. Oh, here's that piece that we were talking about. That was sometime in the summer of 2023 that I did a few times over. Starting to get a little bit better here with white flowers. I remember these pages just trying to practice a lot of wet on wet technique. This was a tutorial I did on Skillshare. I remember being quite happy with this piece here and this piece here, starting to add a little bit more mixed media. This is black marker onto my watercolors. Some mark making, using the calligraphy pen here. Ah, this is what I was looking for. So here is the wreath that I did over. I wish I had dated it so I could see when I did it. But this is the first wreath that I made sometime in either January or December 2023. This must have been about like 8 or 9 months later, I believe. So you can see there's a lot more volume here. A lot better color bleeds going on, just better composition in general. And we're starting to use paint fruit. We're starting to get fruit. I remember starting to really like pears and using that ink on top of it with my calligraphy pen. All right, we've transitioned over into these Canson notebooks. I'm not that crazy about them, honestly. Oh, I remember being so happy with this. This is watercolor and micron. I'm starting to try and paint bouquets that I get from Trader Joe's. So now everything's coming out a lot more cohesive. This is the front yard of my in-laws' house. I'm starting to add in some wet on dry details here so things look a little bit more put together. More details here. Just a lot of practice too. I can tell I used some gouache on top of this to try and get highlights, but it didn't quite work that well. This is from October 27th of 2023. You can tell I'm a little bit more successful here with that Blooms brush as well, with the filbert brush. Here we're doing a little bit more. I really like these. This is gouache. This is one of my first times really using gouache. Yeah, so my bouquets are starting to come out a lot more successful by this time, between May of 2023 and I guess maybe August or September of 2023, somewhere around there. I think this here was around September of 2023, and I started doing a fall challenge on Instagram, and it kind of marks when I started realizing that I didn't want to just do watercolor, and I wanted to transition a little bit more into mixed media. Here we got another Canson. This is probably around the same time, spring and summer of 2023. Just was using this sketchbook instead when I wanted to make bigger pieces. Starting to have a little bit more details here, a little bit more dimension, which is really nice. I remember trying to play around here on how to get orange and blue together to look nice. And now it's one of my favorite color combinations. I remember hating this. Trying to get a little bit looser, use more wet on wet technique here. A lot of this is really just playing around. I really liked these here. This is when I started practicing my signature on how I was gonna sign my art. This is August 10th, 2023. We're getting there. Wow, at this point I've been painting maybe eight or 9 months almost. Well, I remember being really happy with this piece here. I still am. I'm still very happy with how this came out. Playing around with more bouquets. I think composition is something that I've always struggled with, making these little flower arrangements, and I still do. This is a nice tutorial from Lulu Blue Studio. Getting a little bit better here with composition. Starting to get a little bit into painting fruit. Still haven't strayed much away from just flowers. We're starting to transition into my last 2 finished sketchbooks, which probably got finished around maybe 2 months ago, maybe. And I feel like this is where I've seen the biggest transformations for myself in that, this is my first landscape. This is my first landscape. A YouTube tutorial I found. Starting to make pears now. Now, at this point in time, I have a Pinterest board with pictures of still life and fruit that I can use as references. I'm practicing my signature here for my art. Starting to make more pears. Really, I was just really obsessed with pears for a while, and starting to use a lot more ink with my watercolors to add that extra oomph. So playing around with fruit, trying to play around with trees here and pumpkins. I'm adding backgrounds to my paintings now to see what that adds. Still have some pages like this, which are just a lot of practice, and I guess I still have pages like that in my sketchbook. I really like how this one came out. Remember being unhappy with how these flowers are both facing that way, so redoing it over here and still trying to figure out where these shadows go. I think this was the first painting I made that I started outlining with color pencil, so I'm starting to be a little bit more influenced by mixed media artists around this time, whenever this was. But, you know, I still always kind of go back to these floral arrangements here, which I'm getting better at. They're looking fuller, not too chaotic. This is when I started playing with the idea of I want to start making more landscapes, just not really knowing where to start with that. This is a tutorial by Crystal Tan I did a few months ago. again, trying to play with some landscapes and seeing how that works out for me. This is from a Jenna Rainey tutorial on different kinds of flowers. Still making a lot of bouquets here, and they're a little bit better looking. A lot of these, I believe, are just coming from my imagination, which is really hard for me. This again is a crystal tan tutorial. I actually just recently did this maybe a month ago. Because I realized I still had a page available on here. So landscape from the Landscape Club, I believe, on Instagram that I've been participating in more. Some wreaths. I tried to paint this landscape and I had a really hard time drawing these houses out, but that's something I'm still working on. Oh, so yeah, so now this is full mixed media territory that I'm working in. This must be within the last maybe 2 or 3 months. I joined Sketchitstudio's Patreon. So here, I think this is mostly watercolor here, but here I definitely know that I've used some gouache, some acrylic markers to add these details. Yeah, we're getting pretty close to present time here. And then my last finished sketchbook here. Again, this started August of 2023. And so between this and now is when I start playing around a lot more with mixed media. So this book is set aside. I'm still mostly doing florals. I think I started straying away from exclusively florals around September of 2023. Here it's still August. This is a pretty nice, I was pretty happy with this coffee mug. I got some inks that I wanted to play around with here. Micron pen and watercolor. I'm starting to get into fruits now, so this is kind of my transitionary phase into, okay, what else can I paint that's very bright and colorful and fun, that's not just flowers? And that's when I started getting into fruits. So a little fox for our fall challenge. Trying to play with these acrylic inks and figure out how they work. Fall florals. This is from my practice pages now, trying to finally execute some tiny little landscapes. So these are some of my very first landscape paintings, and I'm pretty happy with them. Trying to be a little bit more abstract with them. I really like how this one came out. And here I'm starting to play around with adding backgrounds to my florals, which I still like to do now. These guys, this guy here. Oh yeah, this is a picture of my backyard. Okay, so when I was filming this, I accidentally totally forgot about this sketchbook right here, which is actually my last fully complete sketchbook. So this one here is where I've fully just gone all out with mixed media. The majority of my paintings are no longer just watercolor. I am using watercolor, ink, colored pencils, neocolors, acrylic markers, literally anything I can get my hands on. So this sketchbook here is a bit more representative of my transition from almost exclusively watercolor florals to now me just wanting to paint everything with anything. So that's everything. So those are my notebooks, my sketchbooks, sorry, that I was working on probably until about, like a month ago or 2 months ago. And I would say one of the biggest transformative periods of my art journey so far in this last year would be probably the last 2 or 3 months when I started discovering mixed media, going out of my comfort zone, not just painting florals, but trying to paint fruits, vegetables, landscapes, just realizing that I want to be able to paint the world around me. Starting November 25th, 2023, I got this sketchbook here, and this is the current sketchbook that the majority of my artwork goes in now. It's a lot smaller, which gives me a little bit more freedom, less pressure. I keep it to myself. I keep it on me all of the time. I'm not ripping out pages to give to people, so it's very low pressure and gives me a lot of freedom to just do whatever I want and not be afraid of messing up. So I figured I'd just show you what my sketchbook looks like lately, so we can kind of compare it to, you know, where I'm at now to where I was one whole year ago. So here we've got figs. We've got figs. This is watercolor ink here, and an acrylic paint pen, landscape, some papaya, freesias. And the majority of these pages are not just watercolor. This is one of my first pieces using the Neo colors, the Caran d'Ache Neo colors, some sepia colored ink, some mushrooms using acrylic paint marker and ink. I have ink pens here to try and make my dogs. I invested in some gouaches, which I'm still playing with and trying to figure out. Just more landscapes with watercolor, Neo colors, acrylic paint pens. This is all just Neo colors. Christmas time's coming, some carrots. I was really happy with how this one came out. This is when I started getting into portraits. This must have been just about a month ago, and now I'm just totally obsessed with painting portraits. This is my first, you know, watercolor portrait. Me trying to paint my husband, draw myself, my friends, my husband. And yeah, this is where my practice is at right now. Just kind of playing around with everything. And at this point, my ultimate goal with my art is just to, with freedom and without any pressure, be able to paint the things around me. Put down on paper what I see in the world. So that painting and creating is more of just an expressive outlet versus something that I feel pressured to be very good at. I mean, of course, if I get better at painting, I'm not gonna complain. These are my most recent ones. This is within this last week. I made this portrait here. This is some little warm-up sketches in the morning, a little gouache practice. This is a painting I just made today. I made this last night. And finally, today's Patreon session with Owen Marwin. Okay guys, that's everything. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope that someone finds a benefit in being able to see, you know, what someone else's art journey looks like from the very beginning, 1 year later. You know, there's no right or wrong place to be after painting for 1 year or 2 years or 5 months. You know, I feel like my style and my motivations in my art have changed 1,000,001 times in this last year. But I think the biggest transformation that I have made in this last year is trying to remove the fear and pressure from my art practice, the pressure to be good, the pressure to be as good as other artists, or as good as other artists were after only 1 year of painting. And then I think with making it a point to be less afraid, I have experienced the most growth and discovered more mediums, ready and more willing and excited to play with a bunch of different kinds of paints and oils and watercolors, and maybe all of that play sometimes results in things that are ugly, but I also love a lot of the ugly things that I made, because every single time that I sit down to paint or draw or sketch or whatever it is, I can feel myself becoming better. So if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to my page. Please give me some feedback if you want to see more videos like this. And I'll try and put in the notes of this YouTube video some of the artists that I have followed and used their tutorials the most in this last year, who have been some of my biggest influences. So thank you so much, guys, for watching.